Can you solve all these metallic bond questions? Bar and P. You're right. Covalent bond is the correct answer.
Crana.
Well done. Would not bond is the right choice.
Awenag. Correct response. Metallic bond is the most accurate answer. Kel. Smart pick. Ionic bond is the correct choice. Silicon has. On track. Gigantic covalent structure is the correct answer. Gold oxide. Nice selection. Ionic is the correct and valid answer. Sethov Watts. Right again. Covalent is a valid answer. Sea of electrons. Strong choice. Metallic bonding is the right answer. Low melting point. You chose covalent bonds, and it is correct. Boron trifluoride. Correct. Covalent is the right answer. High melting point. Good job. Your answer, ionic bonds, works well here. A titanium band is. Solid response. Metallic solid is a valid choice. Electrons are shared. Good thinking. Covalent is the right answer. Malleable and ductile. Well reasoned. Metallic is the correct choice. Form crystalline solids. Exactly. Ionic makes sense and it is right choice. Ductile is a property of. Great job. Metallic compound is the accurate answer. Formed between nonmetals. Bravo, covalent is the answer. Are a sea of electrons. Sharp thinking. Metallic is the right choice. Electrons are transferred. Smart move. Ionic is an accurate answer. A negatively charged ion. Great thinking. Anion is the right choice.
Ions of the halogen atoms.
Excellent choice. Halide ions is the right answer. Malleable is a property of. Nicely done. Metallic compound is a solid answer. Dative bond can be found in. Clear logic. Your choice ammonium ion is sound and 100% true. The strongest covalent bond. Nice work. You chose triple and it is correct. Which is not a type of solid. You got it? Your choice halogenic is right. What type of compound is CaF2? Excellent. Ionic is a brilliant choice. Metallic bond can be formed by. Well picked. Electrons plus atomic cores is the correct answer. Compound of cations and anions. Valid point. Ionic compound is true. Metallic structures tend to be. Right choice. Hard and malleable is the best answer. The covalent bond forms between. Perfect. A non-metal and a non-metal is the correct choice. Give an example of an ionic bond. Well done. Nexi is the right choice. What bonds hold metals together? Correct. Metallic bonds is the right answer. What type of bond is cousin alloy? Good thinking. Metallic is the right answer.
Dative covalent bond is found in. Perfect. Ammonium ion is the correct choice.
What kind of bonding is in iron?
You got it? Your choice metallic is right.
Can be solids, liquids, or gases. Smart pick. Covalent is the correct choice.
Metallic bonds are formed between. Strong choice. Metal atoms is the right answer. An ionic bond will happen between.
Nice selection. Metal and non-metal is the correct and valid answer.
What type of bond? Copper and gold.
You chose metallic, and it is correct.
Which chemical bond is the weakest? Right again. Metallic bond is a valid answer. Which type of bond only has metals? Good job. Your answer, metallic, works well here.
High melting point is a property of.
Valid point. Ionic compound is true.
Which bond would be the least polar? Great thinking. He is the right choice. Unequal sharing of valence electron.
Smart move. Polar covalent bond is an accurate answer. What holds ionic compounds together?
Sharp thinking. Ionic bonds is the right choice. Intermolecular force present in Cl2. Right choice. Dispersion is the best answer. What type of bonding occurs in NaCl? You're right. Ionic is the correct answer. What type of bonding is found for Zen?
Nicely done. Metallic bonding is a solid answer.
A compound made of only 2 elements.
Well reasoned. Binary is the correct choice. Write the formula when Al and O bond.
On track. The most important is the correct answer. Ammonium ion is an example for. Exactly. Coordinate compound makes sense and it is right choice. A metallic bond is a bond between dash. Correct response. Metals is the most accurate answer. A molecule made of 2 atoms is called. Clear logic. Your choice diatomic molecule is sound and 100% true. Very soluble in water is a property of.
Nice work. You chose ionic compound, and it is correct.
Metallic bonds take place between dash. Well picked. Just metals is the correct answer. What type of bond? Carbon and fluorine. Bravo. Covalent is the answer. Coordinates bonds are also called dash. Excellent choice. Dative bonds is the right answer. Why do metals have high melting points? Excellent. Strong metallic bonds is a brilliant choice. What type of bond? Calcium and chlorine? Great job. Ionic is the accurate answer. What type of bond? Hydrogen and lithium. Solid response. Ionic is a valid choice. Strong absorbers and reflectors of light. You got it. Your choice metallic is right. Carbon and oxygen will make a dash bond. Exactly. Covalent makes sense, and it is right choice. What are good conductors of electricity? Smart move. Both 2 and 3 is an accurate answer. Negatively charged ions are called what?
Well reasoned. Anion is the correct choice.
Which of the following is an ionic bond? Smart pick. Cat2 is the correct choice.
An ionic bond is the attraction between. Valid point. Oppositely charged ions is true.
The force that holds two atoms together. You're right. Chemical bond is the correct answer. Metals with another metal form a dash.
Excellent. Metallic bond is a brilliant choice.
Non-metals and non-metals form a dash. Nicely done. Covalent bond is a solid answer. A compound composed of cations and anions. Great job. Ionic compound is the accurate answer. Sodium and bromine will make a dash bond. Perfect. Ionic is the correct choice. Cac2 is an example of what type of bond? Sharp thinking. Ionic is the right choice. Electrons that are free to move in metals. You chose delocalized electrons, and it is correct. What kind of element forms covalent bond? Excellent choice. Nonmetals is the right answer. What is the Vseprey theory used to predict? Well done. Molecular shape is the right choice. Can conduct electrical and thermal energy. On track. Metallic is the correct answer. As bond length increase the strength, dash. Bravo. Decreases is the answer, which is an example of a metallic solid. Great thinking. Iron is the right choice. Beryllium and sulfur will form a dash bond. Right again? Ionic is a valid answer. What type of bonding is present in metals? Good job. Your answer, metallic bonding, works well here. Crystal lattice structure is a property of. Well picked. Ionic compound is the correct answer. Metallic solids are solids made entirely of. Nice work. You chose one metallic element and it is correct. Type of intermolecular force present in F. Good thinking. Hydrogen bond is the right answer. Hydrogen and chlorine will form a dash bond. Correct. Covalent is the right answer. Determine the type of forces present in psi. Solid response. Covalent bond is a valid choice. What is needed for a metallic bond to form? Correct response. Metal atoms is the most accurate answer. What is the smallest unit of metallic bond? Nice selection. Atom is the correct and valid answer. A covalent bond of one pair. Right choice. Single bond is the best answer. What types of elements are in an ionic bond? Strong choice. Metal and a nonmetal is the right answer. Represents the way electrons exist in metals. Clear logic. Your choice electron C model is sound and 100% true. What type of bond exists in a molecule of I2? Correct. Nonpolar covalent bonds is the right answer. A substance that forms in a chemical reaction.
Exactly. Product makes sense and it is right choice.
Metallic bonding occurs between atoms of dash. Well reasoned. Copper is the correct choice. Nitrogen-oxygen react. their bond is dash.
Well picked. Covalent is the correct answer.
Which of these atoms will form an ionic bond? Excellent choice. Mangan O is the right answer. A particle with a positive or negative charge. Smart pick. Iron is the correct choice. Which molecule has a nonpolar covalent bond? Sharp thinking. Right is the right choice. Lithium and fluorine react. Their bond is dash. Valid point. Ionic is true. What type of bonding occurs in carbon dioxide? Nice selection. Covalent is the correct and valid answer. An ionic bond forms when atoms dash electrons. On track. Transfer is the correct answer. What type of elements will form an ionic bond? Great thinking. Metals plus nonmetals is the right choice. When elements bond, they are dash and have dash. You got it. Your choice, more stable, less energy, is right. What type of bond do hydrogen and carbon form? Good job. Your answer, covalent, works well here. What is the sea of electrons model related to? Nice work. You chose metallic bonding, and it is correct. What kind of bond forms between two nonmetals? Smart move. Covalent is an accurate answer. Nonmetal plus nonmetal elements typically form an. Clear logic. Your choice covalent bond is sound and 100% true. In metals, dash form a shared sea of electrons. Good thinking. The valence electrons is the right answer. Which of these is not a real bond in chemistry? Strong choice. James is the right answer. How many electrons are shared in a triple bond? Solid response. 6 is a valid choice. Atoms that share one or more pairs of electrons. Great job. Covalent bond is the accurate answer. An interaction that holds atoms or ions together. Nicely done. Chemical bond is a solid answer. Potassium iodide, Ki, has the following bonding. You're right. Ionic is the correct answer. What is the measure of a tetrahedral bond angle? Perfect. 195 degrees is the correct choice. When an ionic bond is formed, electrons are dash. Right again. Gained or lost is a valid answer. What type of bonding occurs between metal atoms? You chose metallic bonding, and it is correct. If boron bonds with hydrogen, a dash bond forms. Excellent. Nonpolar covalent is a brilliant choice. A dash bond exists between a metal and non-metal. Bravo. Ionic is the answer. Which two elements would not form an ionic bond? Right choice. Calcium and lithium is the best answer. Represents the number of units of each substance. Well done. Coefficient is the right choice. Compounds have higher melting and boiling points. Correct response. Ionic is the most accurate answer. Which element is held together by metallic bonds? Great job. Manganese is the accurate answer. Choose the type of bonding in the element. Sodium. Right choice.
Metallic bond is the best answer.
What type of bonding is characteristic of metals? Smart pick. Metallic bonding is the correct choice. What type of bonds are in this substance? 3-2. Well done. Covalent molecular is the right choice. What kind of atoms are bonded in a covalent bond? Solid response. Nonmetals is a valid choice. What happens to the electrons in a metallic bond? Well reasoned. Highly mobile valence electrons is the correct choice.
Which pair of elements should form an ionic bond? A.
Well picked. Sodium and fluorine is the correct answer. What type of bonding is present in a sample of Fe? What? Valid point. Metallic is true. Which element will form an ionic bond with oxygen? Nicely done. Sodium is a solid answer.
What are the 3 types of strong chemical bonds?
Nice selection. Metallic, ionic and covalent is the correct and valid answer. Cannot conduct electricity when dissolved in water. You chose covalent, and it is correct! Which type of bonding is found in sodium chloride? Good thinking. Ionic is the right answer. What kind of bond will potassium form with sulfur? Strong choice. Ionic is the right answer. Every ionic bond results in the formation of a dash.
Right again. Crystal lattice is a valid answer. When electrons are shared, a dash bond is formed.
Correct. Covalent is the right answer. Electrons aren't lost or shared, just held together.
You got it? Your choice metallic is right.
Result from a small difference in electronegativity. Excellent. Covalent is a brilliant choice. What kind of bond forms when atoms share electrons? On track. Covalent is the correct answer. Compounds that contain oppositely charged particles. Bravo! Ionic compounds is the answer. What bond is formed between a metal and a nonmetal? Exactly. Ionic bond makes sense, and it is right choice. Metal cations are held together because of the dash. Sharp thinking. Sea of electrons is the right choice. What formula results when Fe+3 and Co3 ions bond? Smart move. Fp is an accurate answer.
Which of these element pairs would bond covalently?
Perfect. F and Cl is the correct choice. The number of electron pairs shared in double bond. Correct response. 1 is the most accurate answer. A covalent bond is a bond between a dash and a dash. Good job. Your answer nonmetal. Nonmetal works well here.
A force that brings oppositely charged ions together.
You're right. Ionic bond is the correct answer. Which type of bond forms between 2 or more metals? Great thinking. Metallic is the right choice. Elements bond in order to have dash electron shells. Nice work. You chose full and it is correct. A single covalent bond is made up of dash electrons. Clear logic.
Your choice too is sound and 100% true.
Which pure substance would undergo metallic bonding? Excellent choice. Copper, Q, is the right answer. What type of bond will form between zinc and copper?
Great thinking. Metallic is the right choice.
Loss of valence electrons results in the formation of.
Strong choice. Cation is the right answer. Metallic bond is the electrostatic attraction between. Well reasoned. Cations and delocalized electrons is the correct choice. When a metal is drawn into a wire, the metallic bonds.
Good thinking. Do not break is the right answer.
Which type of bond are electrons donated or received?
Solid response. Ionic is a valid choice.
Which type of bond has an equal sharing of electrons? Excellent. Nonpolar covalent is a brilliant choice. Of these three molecules, which represents a covalent bond? Right again. Il is a valid answer. Predict the type of bond between helium and fluorine. Valid point. No bond is true. Which of the following has the weakest metallic bond?
Great job. Cesium is the accurate answer.
Which of the following elements wants to bond 3 times? Correct. Phosphorus is the right answer. Determine the type of bond in an oxygen molecule. Bravo. Double covalent is the answer. Which factor contributes to stronger metallic bonding? Good job. Your answer increasing ionic charge works well here. What type of forces hold on an ionic lattice together?
Clear logic. Your choice, electrostatic attraction forces, is sound and 100% true.
What type of bond is formed between carbon and oxygen?
Right choice. Covalent is the best answer.
Which of the following compounds contain hydrogen bond?
You got it. Your choice, water, is right.
A covalent bond is formed when 2 atoms dash electrons. Correct response. Share is the most accurate answer. What kinds of elements does an ionic bond form between? Exactly. Metals and nonmetals make sense, and it is right choice. What is the type of bonding between metal atoms called? Nicely done. Metallic bonding is a solid answer. Force that holds oppositely charged particles together. Well done. Ionic bond is the right choice. A bond between a nonmetal and a nonmetal is called a. Perfect. Covalent bond is the correct choice. What is the name of the chemical bond you are studying? You're right. Metal bond is the correct answer. What charge do the metal ions have in metallic bonding?
Smart move. Positive is an accurate answer.
Which atom will form the most polar bond with hydrogen? You chose F, and it is correct. Which type of chemical bond is formed in aluminum wire? Smart pick. Metallic is the correct choice. Electrons form an attraction within a pool of electrons.
Nice work. You chose metallic, and it is correct. When potassium and iodine combine, they make a dash bond.
Nice selection. Ionic is the correct and valid answer. When thallium and bismuth combine, they make a dash bond.
Excellent choice. Metallic is the right answer.
This type of bonding can be described as a cooperation.
Well picked. Covalent is the correct answer.
Dash bonding takes place between a metal and a non-metal. Sharp thinking. Ionic is the right choice. Name the bond in which the orbitals overlap head-to-head. On track. Sigma bond is the correct answer. A dash occurs when atom shares delocalized electrons.
Excellent. Metallic bond is a brilliant choice.
The attraction between oppositely charged ions is called. Oh. Good thinking. An ionic bond is the right answer. What type of bonding involves a sea of electrons model?
Clear logic. Your choice metallic is sound and 100% true.
This type of bonding can be described as I give, I get. Smart pick. Ionic is the correct choice. If a compound ends in ite or ate, it is most likely a. Great job. Polyatomic ion is the accurate answer. What kind of bond will form between hydrogen and oxygen?
Excellent choice. Covalent is the right answer.
Chemical formula represents ratio of ions in the crystal.
Sharp thinking. Ionic is the right choice.
What types of elements are in a covalent molecular bond?
Nice work. You chose nonmetals only, and it is correct.
What is the overall charge of metals in metallic bonding? Right again. Neutral charge is a valid answer. Which type of bond shares electrons between its elements?
Well done. Covalent molecular is the right choice.
Type of intermolecular force present in I2, Per2 and Kel2. Well picked. London dispersion is the correct answer. Mobile electrons in the metallic bond are responsible for.
You're right. All of the above is the correct answer.
What type of bond is formed by the transfer of electrons?
On track. Ionic is the correct answer. When fluorine and hydrogen combine, they make a dash bond. Good job. Your answer covalent works well here. Metallic bonds are formed between the atoms of metals and.
Nice selection. Metals is the correct and valid answer.
The ability of metal to be hammered into sheets is called. Perfect. Malleability is the correct choice. When molybdenum and sulfur combine, they make a Dashker bond.
Valid point. Ionic is true.
How do the following two elements bond together? Al3 plus O2. Solid response. The most important is a valid choice. Which type of chemical bond holds Cra together? Correct. Metallic bonding is the right answer. Which kind of compound is solid hard at room temperature?
Right choice. Ionic is the best answer.
What type of bonding occurs between two or more nonmetals? You got it? Your choice covalent is right. What type of bond will form between magnesium and oxygen? Exactly. Ionic makes sense, and it is right choice. In metallic bonding, the positive ions are surrounded by.
Correct response. Electrons is the most accurate answer.
Bonds that form between two metals are called dash bonds.
Well reasoned. Metallic is the correct choice. What is it called when atoms share two pairs of electrons?
Bravo! A double bond is the answer. A single line is used to show a dash in a Lewis structure. Strong choice. Single bond is the right answer. In metallic bonds, the force of attraction is between dash. Smart move. Positive ions and electrons is an accurate answer. The lowest whole number ratio of ions in an ionic compound.
You chose formula unit, and it is correct.
Tug of war between atoms best describes what kind of bond. Nicely done. Covalent is a solid answer.
State which group one metal has the strongest metallic bond.
Great thinking is the right choice. Which of the following would not be able to metallic bond? Good thinking. Oxygen is the right answer.
Name the type of bonding in which the electrons are shared.
Good job. Your answer covalent bonding works well here. What type of chemical bond is formed between two nonmetals?
Valid point. Covalent is true. Which kind of compound has high melting and boiling points? Bravo, ionic is the answer. The simplest ratio of ions represented in an ionic compound. Well picked. Formula unit is the correct answer. Electrons that are free to move in metals are called dash. Nice selection. Delocalized electrons is the correct and valid answer. A covalent bond in which electrons are shared unequally is.
Solid response. Polar is a valid choice.
How many chlorine atoms should bond with one aluminum atom? Perfect. 3 is the correct choice. What happens to the electrons in a covalent molecular bond?
Well reasoned. Shares is the correct choice.
Which type of bond occurs when two opposite charges attract?
You're right. Ionic bond is the correct answer.
The attraction of valence electrons for positive metal ions.
Clear logic. Your choice metallic bond is sound and 100% true.
Dash. Compounds are poor electrical conductors in all phases.
Great thinking. Covalent is the right choice. When metals bond with non-metals, they form what type of bonds? Excellent. Ionic is a brilliant choice. A covalent double bond would be made of dash, total electrons.
Exactly. 4 makes sense, and it is right choice.
Electrons move freely in a metallic bond because they are dash. Great job. Delocalized electrons is the accurate answer.
How can you determine if two elements will form an ionic bond? Correct. Differences in electron negativity is the right answer. Which model is used to explain the nature of metallic bonding? Correct response. The electron C model is the most accurate answer.
What is the role of delocalized electrons in metallic bonding?
Strong choice. Conductivity and malleability is the right answer.
What are the two elements called that form in a covalent bond? Air.
You chose nonmetal and nonmetal, and it is correct.
A pair of electrons that are not involved in a bond are called?
Excellent choice. Lone pair is the right answer. The number of pairs of electrons shared in triple covalent bond. On track, 3 is the correct answer.
Chemical bonds where electrons are shared between atoms is a
Right again. Covalent bond is a valid answer.
A model used to show the valence electrons of an atom is called
Sharp thinking. Electron dot diagram is the right choice.
A bond that forms when electrons are transferred is called a van.
Nice work. You chose ionic bond and it is correct.
Which type of substance tends to shatter when force is applied?
You got it? Your choice ionic is right.
In metals, the outer electrons form a shared dash of electrons.
Nicely done. C is a solid answer.
What type of bond occurs between a positive and a negative ion?
Well done. Ionic bond is the right choice.
Metallic bonds are best described as metal cations in a sea of.
Right choice. Free electrons is the best answer.
An electronegativity difference greater than 1.7 results in dash.
Smart move. Ionic bonding is an accurate answer.
Malleability and ductility are characteristics of compounds with. Smart pick. Metallic bonds is the correct choice. What kind of chemical bond forms between a metal and a non-metal?
Good thinking. Ionic is the right answer.
What property of metals allows them to be malleable and ductile? You chose delocalized electrons, and it is correct.
Factors affecting metallic bond strength. Dash and atomic radius.
Smart move. Number of valence electrons is an accurate answer.
What type of bond is CO?
Nicely done. Polar covalent is a solid answer.
Which metallic crystal structure has a coordination number of A?
Correct response. Body-centered cubic is the most accurate answer. The force of attraction binding oppositely charged ions together. Clear logic. Your choice ionic bond is sound and 100% true. Which of the following pairs of elements will form an ionic bond?
Exactly. SAR and Bur makes sense, and it is right choice.
Metallic bonding is most commonly found in which state of matter? You're right. Solid is the correct answer. What type of bond is formed by atoms gaining or losing electrons?
Valid point. Ionic is true.
What type of bond occurs between a metal and a non-metal element?
You got it? Your choice ionic is right.
Beryllium will dash valence electrons when forming an ionic bond.
On track. Lose 2 is the correct answer.
Which two elements would not be capable of forming an ionic bond?
Correct. Phosphorus and chlorine is the right answer.
If sodium and oxygen formed a bond, it would be classified as dash.
Excellent choice. Ionic is the right answer.
Identify the following compound as ionic, metallic, or covalent. Mago. Well picked. Ionic is the correct answer. Which type of bond shares a cloud C of mobile valence electrons? Well reasoned. Metallic is the correct choice. Which of the following would be held together by the metallic bond? Right choice. Atoms of iron is the best answer.
Which type of bond is formed by the union of nonmetals with metals?
Sharp thinking. Ionic bond is the right choice.
Dash compounds are usually hard, brittle solids at room temperature. Solid response. Ionic is a valid choice.
Which type of bond allows electrons to move freely among the atoms?
Nice selection. Metallic is the correct and valid answer.
What type of bond occurs when two or more elements share electrons?
Smart pick. Covalent is the correct choice.
A mixture of two or more elements, at least one of which is a metal.
Right again. Alloy is a valid answer.
High luster is a property of structures held together by dash bonds.
Perfect. Metallic is the correct choice.
What type of structures are conductors due to delocalized electrons? Great job. Metallic is the accurate answer.
What analogy best describes the valence electrons in a metallic bond? Excellent. A C is a brilliant choice.
A bond with a partially negative end and a partially positive end is?
Bravo, polar is the answer. What is the force that holds metal atoms together in metallic bonding?
Nice work. You chose metallic bond, and it is correct. Which of the following elements possesses the strongest metallic bond?
Strong choice. Magnesium is the right answer.
Type of covalent bond in which the electrons are being shared equally? Great thinking. Nonpolar bond is the right choice.
Elements such as silicon, diamond, and graphite. Compounds include CO.
Well done. Giant covalent is the right choice.
A combination of chemical symbols and numbers to represent a substance.
Good job. Your answer chemical formula works well here.
Which of the following properties is not explained by metallic bonding?
Great thinking. Brittleness is the right choice.
An ionic bond forms when dash are transferred from one atom to another.
Solid response. Electrons is a valid choice.
Chemical formula represents number of atoms in each individual molecule.
Smart move. Covalent is an accurate answer.
Which type of bond creates a pool or sea of electrons between ions? Great job. Metallic bonds is the accurate answer.
Malleability is a characteristic of solids held together by dash bonds.
Right again. Metallic is a valid answer.
A sea of free-flowing electrons around closely packed cations forms dash.
Bravo. Metallic bonds is the answer. What is the force that holds the structure of metallic bonding together?
You got it. Your choice, electrostatic force, is right.
Which kind of compound is a poor conductor of electricity in all phases?
Right choice. Covalent molecular is the best answer.
How does the strength of metallic bonding affect the hardness of metals?
Nice selection. Metal becomes harder is the correct and valid answer.
The electrostatic attraction that binds oppositely charged ions together.
Excellent choice. Ionic bond is the right answer.
How do impurities affect the conductivity of metals in metallic bonding?
Correct. Decreased conductivity is the right answer.
Which type of bond has a transfer of an electron from one atom to another?
Sharp thinking. Ionic is the right choice.
What type of bond forms between two or more atoms that are charged?
Good job. Your answer, ionic bond, works well here. This forms between metal atoms when their outermost energy levels overlap. Valid point. Metallic bond is true.
Which type of bond is a good conductor of electricity in the solid phase?
Smart pick. Metallic is the correct choice. In metallic bonding, what is there none of to pick up the extra electrons? Well done. Nonmetals is the right choice.
A mixture of two or more elements that have metallic properties is called.
Strong choice. Alloy is the right answer. The energy required to break the bonds between two covalently bonded atoms. Correct response. Bone dissociation energy is the most accurate answer.
In an electron dot diagram, two pairs of shared electrons represents a dash.
Nicely done. Double bond is a solid answer.
A bond that forms when atoms share one or more pairs of electrons is called.
Nice work. You chose covalent bond, and it is correct.
The bonds between hydrogen and oxygen in a water molecule are classified as.
You chose polar covalent, and it is correct.
Which is the second strongest intermolecular force after hydrogen bonding?
Perfect. Dipole-dipole forces is the correct choice.
Forms large crystals with an ordered arrangement of oppositely charged ions.
Exactly. Ionic makes sense, and it is right choice.
Which type of solid has mobile electrons in the crystal?
Clear logic. Your choice, metallic, is sound and 100% true.
Which pair of atoms will share electrons when a bond is formed between them?
Excellent. Ion F is a brilliant choice.
Which type of bonding involves the collective behavior of valence electrons?
Good thinking. Metallic bonding is the right answer.
What is the type of force attraction is present in ionic and metallic bonds?
You're right. Electrostatic attraction is the correct answer. What is the name of the three-dimensional pattern that forms when ions bond? Well picked. A crystal lattice is the correct answer.
Which type of bond has their electrons transfer from one element to another? Well reasoned. Ionic is the correct choice.
Which of the following is not a property of substances with metallic bonding?
On track. Poor conductor of electricity is the correct answer.
How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format?
Nicely done. Contact Narayan Changda is a solid answer.